A warm summer afternoon brought hundreds of tourists to the area around Buckingham Palace. The sun was shining brightly, and the golden gates of the palace sparkled as if inviting everyone to admire them. People from different countries walked around with cameras, excited to see the famous royal guards in their tall black hats and red uniforms. Families took pictures, children pointed excitedly, and couples held hands as they waited for the perfect moment to snap a memory. Among the crowd was a woman named Sandra. She had come to London for the first time and had big expectations about what she wanted to experience. From the moment she arrived at the palace, she acted as though everything and everyone should move according to her wishes. She sighed loudly when people walked slowly. She complained when someone stepped into her camera frame. She even rolled her eyes whenever she felt the line wasn't moving fast enough. While everyone else patiently waited behind the ropes, Sandra believed she deserved special treatment. She held her phone tightly in her hand, ready to take the most dramatic selfie she could manage. She had watched videos of tourists posing with the royal guards, and she decided her photo needed to be even better than all of theirs. She imagined herself standing right next to a guard, smiling confidently, and posting it online to impress her friends. In the crowd stood a royal guard on duty. He was tall, focused, and completely still, just like all the guards trained to be. His eyes looked straight ahead, not reacting to the excitement around him. Tourists admired his discipline, whispering to each other about how impressive the guards always looked. Children tried to imitate the stiff posture, and parents laughed quietly while making sure everyone stayed behind the marked line for safety. Sandra, however, was not interested in any rules. She tapped her foot impatiently and looked around as if searching for someone to complain to. She muttered that she didn't understand why she had to wait like everyone else. In her mind, she was doing something simple, just taking a picture. She couldn't see why she couldn't get a closer view when she had traveled so far. A few people nearby noticed her attitude. One elderly man shook his head gently and whispered to his wife, "Some travelers forget that these guards are not actors. They are real officers doing their duty." The wife nodded in agreement and smiled politely at him. But Sandra didn't notice anyone's concern. She was too focused on what she wanted. When a family with young children moved in front of her to take a picture, Sandra let out an exaggerated sigh. She stepped sideways, squeezed past them, and placed herself directly against the rope barrier. The children looked at her curiously, wondering why she seemed so upset, but their parents guided them away without saying anything. They didn't want to get involved in someone else's mood. Sandra's frustration grew as more tourists gathered. She felt blocked, ignored, and overshadowed by all the other visitors. She started mumbling that she deserved a better view because she had spent money on her trip and didn't want to waste time. She glanced at the guard again, as still and silent as a statue. The more she looked at him, the more she felt like he was the perfect subject for her photo, better than any palace scenery or group shot she could take. In her excitement, she didn't consider the signs placed around the area. They clearly stated that visitors must stay behind the ropes and respect the guards' personal space. Palace staff had even reminded people multiple times that the guards were working and should not be disturbed. Many tourists nodded politely and followed the instructions without question. But Sandra felt differently. She believed the rules were meant for other people, not for her. At one point, a staff member passing by gently reminded everyone, "Please stay behind the ropes and enjoy your visit safely." Most visitors smiled and nodded. As now, Sandra rolled her eyes again, feeling that the message was aimed at her, though it wasn't. She muttered under her breath that she was perfectly safe and didn't need anyone telling her what to do. She waited until she felt the crowd wasn't paying attention to her anymore. Then she slowly leaned forward, stretching her arm over the rope to test how close she could get. She snapped a quick picture, but it wasn't enough for her. She wanted a full selfie, a close-up. Something she believed would capture attention online. Instead of stepping back, she looked left and right to see if any staff were nearby. When she didn't spot anyone in her immediate area, she felt even more confident. The guard continued standing firm, unaware of Sandra's growing impatience. His quiet strength only made her more determined to get her way. She whispered to herself, encouraging her own boldness. thinking that she would only take a moment and it wouldn't cause any problems. She didn't think about the possibility of interrupting the guard's duty. She didn't think about the fact that tourists needed to keep a respectful distance. She thought only about her picture. As she stood there planning her next move, the crowd kept shifting naturally, and people admired the palace gates and the changing light of the afternoon sun. A group of students laughed quietly while taking pictures of each other. A couple shared a soft conversation about how magical the place felt. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the atmosphere, everyone except Sandra, who grew more impatient by the minute. She convinced herself that if she didn't take the picture now, she might lose her chance forever. Her visit to London was short, and she didn't want to leave without the perfect photo, so she stepped closer again, resting her phone against the rope as she tried to angle the camera for a better shot. But the rope was clearly in her way, and she didn't like the way it spoiled her picture. She sighed loudly and muttered, "This is ridiculous." As if blaming the palace itself for not designing the area around her picture needs. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't going to let a simple rope stop her. Her eyes drifted to the guard one more time. He looked exactly the same as he had for the last several minutes, focused, motionless, calm, and completely dedicated to his duty. Sandra took that stillness as a sign that she could do whatever she wanted without any reaction. She believed the guard wouldn't move, wouldn't speak, and wouldn't stop her. And that thought gave her the push she needed to step even closer. Without considering the consequences, she placed her hand on the rope and leaned forward in a bold attempt to get the photo she wanted. The people around her didn't immediately notice. They were busy with their own experiences. But the moment she shifted her weight forward, everything began to change. The peaceful balance of the scene started to shift, and the first spark of what would become a very memorable incident was quietly set into motion. Sandra stood on her tiptoes, leaning a little more over the rope barrier. She felt a burst of excitement as the guard stood still, not reacting at all. In her mind, this meant she had nothing to worry about. She whispered to herself, encouraging her own confidence, "Just one good picture, that's all I need." The quiet determination in her voice made her feel as if she had every right to do what she was doing. The tourists nearby continued taking pictures of the palace, unaware of her intentions. A soft breeze moved through the crowd, carrying the sounds of children laughing, camera shutters clicking, and guides explaining bits of history. It was a peaceful moment for everyone except Sandra, who felt she was in a race against time. She stretched her arm out again, trying to capture a perfect angle of herself with the palace and the guard in the background. Her phone clicked, but she frowned at the result. The picture looked too far away. She wanted a close-up where the guard appeared right next to her. Nothing else would satisfy her. A man standing behind her noticed her stretching and said softly, "Be careful, miss. You might drop your phone." He wasn't trying to scold her, just offering a kind reminder. But Sandra didn't appreciate it. She forced a smile and nodded, though the look in her eyes showed she wasn't planning to change her behavior. She glanced around again, checking the positions of palace staff. No one seemed to be paying attention to her specifically. She felt invisible in the best way, free to continue pushing the limits. The rope barrier seemed like a small obstacle, something she believed she could ignore for a moment if it helped her get the photo she wanted. She leaned even closer this time, her fingers gripping the rope gently as she put more of her weight forward. Her heart raced not out of fear, but out of excitement. She felt bold, almost proud of her bravery, even though the rules clearly asked visitors to stay behind the line. For Sandra, it was less about breaking rules and more about proving she could get what she wanted. On the other side of the rope, the royal guard remained motionless. His tall black hat and red uniform made him look like part of a perfect painting. The tourists admired his discipline, whispering about how impressive it was that he didn't move at all. But Sandra saw his stillness as permission. She thought he wouldn't respond. No matter what she did, she spoke quietly to herself again. He won't mind. He's used to people taking pictures. It will be quick. She believed her own words, even though she knew nothing about the guard's training or responsibilities. She didn't consider the dignity of his role or the rules protecting both the guard and the visitors. After a few more seconds of hesitation, she made her boldest move yet. She stepped slightly under the rope, just enough that her foot touched the restricted area. It was a tiny step, But it crossed the boundary. She felt a rush of pride, as if she had achieved something important. She raised her phone high and smiled confidently at the camera. A woman nearby gasped softly when she noticed Sandra inside the restricted zone. She didn't say anything, but she nudged her friend and pointed at Sandra. The friend widened her eyes and whispered, "She's really close. She shouldn't be there." They both watched quietly, unsure of whether to call staff or just observe what might happen next. Meanwhile, Sandra was completely focused on her screen, trying different angles and poses. She wasn't thinking about the guard's personal space or his duty. She wasn't thinking about the rules. She was thinking only about how amazing her photo would look. She imagined posting it online, receiving compliments, and telling everyone how she got closer to the guard than anyone else. She didn't notice that the atmosphere around her was beginning to shift. A few more people spotted her crossing the line. Some shook their heads. Others whispered among themselves. One man lifted his phone to record the moment, not out of disrespect, but out of curiosity about how the situation would unfold. Sandra noticed none of this. She was too busy adjusting the lighting on her phone. She smiled, tilted her head, and clicked several photos quickly. But she still wasn't satisfied. She wanted an even closer shot. She wanted to stand right next to the guard, as though she were part of a special display. She convinced herself she could do it as long as no one stopped her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward again, barely a few inches, but farther into the restricted area. Her heart beat faster. She felt fearless and unstoppable. She looked at the guard again, expecting him to remain still, and for a moment, he did. She assumed that meant she was safe. Some tourists exchanged uneasy glances. A young couple nearby whispered to each other. The woman said quietly, "I hope she doesn't cause trouble for herself." The man nodded, noticing how focused Sandra was on her phone instead of her surroundings. One of the children who had been watching earlier tugged on their parent's sleeve. "Mom, she's not supposed to go there, right?" The mother gave a soft smile and replied, "No, she shouldn't. Those rules are important." She gently guided her child's gaze away, not wanting them to worry. Sandra, still facing the guard, tried something risky. She lifted her phone and held it very close to the guard's face, just for a dramatic angle she thought would look perfect online. She never touched him, but she brought her phone dangerously near his space, enough to make the tourists around her hold their breath. She whispered to herself, "Just one more second. One perfect shot." Just one perfect shot, but that 1 second stretched longer as she adjusted her hair, her smile, and the angle of her phone. She moved slowly, trying to get the lighting right. She didn't even realize how close she had leaned in. A soft murmur spread through the crowd like a gentle wave. People weren't loud, but their concern showed in their expressions. Some looked nervous, others curious, and a few simply surprised that someone would ignore the rules so boldly. At this point, a palace staff member began moving through the crowd from the side, politely reminding people to stay behind the rope. His voice didn't reach Sandra yet, but he would soon notice her. Several tourists glanced between Sandra and the staff member, waiting to see what would happen. Still unaware of everything around her, Sandra clicked a few more pictures. She giggled quietly, pleased with how close she had gotten. She felt proud of herself, thinking she was doing something clever. She had no idea that almost everyone around her was watching her now. Her confidence grew even more. She slowly reached out and gently lifted her phone toward the guard's shoulder, hoping to angle it perfectly. The crowd reacted instantly with a quiet gasp, not because she was doing anything harmful, but because it was clear she was crossing boundaries she didn't understand. Sandra, however, didn't look away from her phone. She believed this was her moment, her chance to get a picture unlike anyone else's. She imagined all the likes and comments she would receive. She imagined her friends' surprised reactions. She imagined the bragging rights she would hold after this. But what she didn't imagine was that the rules she ignored were about to catch up with her. The guard, still standing straight and focused, had a duty to maintain his position. But he was not unaware of his surroundings. Though his eyes stayed forward, He was fully trained to observe everything happening around him. Sandra's closeness, her phone, and her crossing the restricted line were all part of his awareness. The moment she leaned forward again, a subtle tension built in the air. The tourists sensed it. Even if Sandra didn't, something was about to change. Something quiet but firm, something she had never expected. Sandra lifted her phone for one final picture, smiling as if she had conquered the moment. She thought she was completely in control, but she had crossed the line literally and figuratively, and the peaceful atmosphere she took for granted was about to shift in a way she never anticipated. The situation she thought she controlled was slowly slipping out of her hands, leading her into a moment she would never forget. Sandra held her phone close to her face, smiling proudly as she prepared to take another picture. She felt confident, almost triumphant, as if she had achieved something no one else dared to attempt. The gentle summer breeze brushed her hair back, and she adjusted her pose again, trying to capture the perfect moment. She believed she had all the time in the world, but the atmosphere around her was no longer the same. The crowd that had been relaxed moments earlier now watched her with growing concern. People exchanged quiet whispers, unsure of how to react. Some visitors stepped back slightly, not wanting to be too close to whatever might happen next. A few tourists even lifted their phones, sensing that something important was about to unfold. Sandra, lost in her own excitement, didn't notice the shift in the air. She didn't notice the way heads turned toward her, or how conversations faded into soft murmurs. She didn't notice the palace staff member approaching from the side, slowly making his way through the crowd. And she didn't notice the subtle change in the royal guard's posture. A slight tightening, a quiet readiness, something that only trained eyes would understand. She continued taking photos, leaning just a little closer. She whispered, "Almost perfect." As if encouraging herself, she believed she was simply being bold and creative, unaware that she was testing limits she shouldn't cross. The royal guard stood as he always did, firm, focused, and dignified. But unlike Sandra, he was not distracted. He was fully aware of everything around him. His duty was not just to stand still. His role required him to monitor the environment, protect the space, and maintain order. Even in his silence, he was alert. As Sandra leaned forward again, her phone gently waving near the guard's shoulder, he sensed the line being crossed. She was no longer just a tourist taking photos. She was inside a restricted area, ignoring posted signs, stepping into a zone meant to be respected for safety and decorum. And while the guard remained calm, he also knew it was time to act according to his training. The moment arrived quietly, not with sudden noise or dramatic gestures, but with a controlled breath from the guard. His stillness shifted into purposeful movement. His posture straightened even more. And in one smooth action, he stepped forward with a firm, commanding presence. His voice, when it came, was powerful and clear. It cut through the soft murmurs of the crowd like a bell ringing in a silent hall. It wasn't harsh, but it was strong, confident, and unmistakably official. "Stand back from the guard." Sandra froze instantly. The sound startled her so much that her phone almost slipped from her hand. She blinked several times, unable to process what had just happened. The guard had moved. The guard had spoken, and the guard had spoken directly to her. The crowd reacted with a collective gasp, not out of fear but out of surprise. They had all seen guards before, but most had never heard one speak on duty. Their firm voices were rare but unforgettable. Several tourists instinctively stepped backward, giving more space to the scene unfolding before them. Sandra's heart raced, and for the first time during her visit, she felt uncertain. Her confidence shrank. She looked up at the guard with wide eyes, unsure of what to do or what she had done wrong. His presence felt much stronger up close. He wasn't just part of a picture anymore, he was an officer performing his duty. The guard stepped forward again, not aggressively but with calm authority, guiding her back toward the safe boundary. His expression remained focused, and his movements were steady. Everything about him showed discipline and control, nothing more. "Return behind the line," he instructed clearly. His voice carried through the courtyard with certainty. There was no confusion in his words. No anger. No disorder, only responsibility. Sandra immediately stepped backward, her cheeks turning warm with embarrassment. She felt dozens of eyes on her, watching her retreat. The confidence she had felt a moment ago melted into quiet discomfort. She wasn't in danger, but she understood that she had gone too far. She clutched her phone tightly, wishing she could disappear into the crowd for a moment. She tried to smile as she stepped back, trying to play off the situation as a misunderstanding. But her voice caught in her throat, and no words came out. Her face showed a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and confusion. The crowd remained silent for a few seconds, absorbing the moment. The guard, having completed his duty, returned to his original position with the same level of discipline he had shown from the beginning. His expression returned to calm focus. It was as if nothing had happened. But for Sandra, everything had changed. The palace staff member finally reached her area and gently approached her. He spoke in a soft, polite tone. "Ma'am, please stay behind the rope next time. It's there for everyone's safety. We want your visit to be enjoyable, but we also need to make sure all rules are followed." Sandra nodded quickly, grateful that his tone was gentle. Her voice finally returned, though it came out in a small, awkward way. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted a picture." The staff member smiled kindly. "I understand. Many visitors enjoy taking pictures. But please remember that the guards are working. They have responsibilities, and we must respect their space." Sandra nodded again, still processing the moment. She felt a heavy mix of embarrassment and relief. She hadn't been scolded harshly, but she had been corrected publicly, and the memory of the guard's strong voice echoed in her mind. Meanwhile, the tourists around her slowly returned to their own activities. Some whispered quietly about the scene, but their words were more about the guard's impressive professionalism than about Sandra herself. A few visitors even admired how calmly the situation had been handled. A man standing nearby turned to his wife and said, "That was quite something." He didn't sound angry, just very sure of his duty. His wife nodded in agreement. A young woman commented to her friend, "It's good they keep things orderly. You never know what can happen in such a crowded place." A child tugged on his father's shirt and said, "The guard talked. I didn't know they could talk." The father chuckled softly and explained, "They don't talk unless they really need to. They're trained to stay focused." Sandra overheard some of the comments, and although she felt embarrassed, the kindness in people's voices eased her discomfort. They weren't mocking her. They were simply impressed by the guard's professionalism. It reminded her that she hadn't been in danger. She had just been corrected for crossing a line she shouldn't have crossed. She sighed softly and tucked her phone into her bag. Her excitement from earlier was gone, replaced by a gentle lesson she hadn't expected to learn. She realized that the guard hadn't reacted out of frustration. He had reacted because it was his duty to maintain order. He wasn't being unkind. He was simply doing his job. Sandra stood quietly among the crowd for a few moments, giving herself time to calm down. She avoided looking directly at the guard, feeling slightly embarrassed, but she also felt grateful. She now understood the importance of respecting boundaries not just for herself, but for everyone around her. After a few minutes, she stepped back and found a new place behind the rope. She lifted her phone again, but this time, she behaved with full respect. She took a few pictures from a safe distance, appreciating the scene in a new way. She even smiled genuinely, grateful for the peaceful moment. The guard, steady and dignified, remained at his post, his presence still commanding attention. But now, Sandra saw him differently, not as a photo opportunity, but as a symbol of responsibility and discipline. The moment had changed everything for her, guiding the story into a direction she had never expected. And though she could not erase what happened, she would soon realize that the consequences of her choice were not quite over yet. The moment the royal guard stepped back into his original position, the atmosphere slowly began to shift again. The tension from earlier softened, and the crowd started breathing normally once more. People whispered quietly to each other, exchanging thoughts about what they had just witnessed. Some were surprised, some were impressed, and some simply felt relieved that nothing serious had happened. Sandra, meanwhile, felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over her. She stood behind the rope, holding her phone tightly, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She tried to act calm, but inside, she felt as if her confidence had fallen apart. She kept replaying the guard's strong voice in her mind. It had startled her, but it had also awakened a realization she wasn't expecting. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to draw any more attention. She wanted to blend back into the crowd. As if she had always been following the rules, she hoped that maybe, just maybe, people would forget about her. But the world rarely works that easily, especially in a place filled with tourists holding cameras. Several people had already recorded parts of the moment. It wasn't because they wanted to shame her. It was because the scene had been unexpected. It was rare for visitors to see a guard speak, and when such things happened, people naturally captured it out of curiosity. A few tourists stepped aside to look at the videos they had taken. Some gasped softly, others let out small surprised laughs. A young man wearing a backpack said to his friend, "Wow, I actually recorded the whole thing. I didn't mean to, but I had my camera on." His friend leaned in to watch. Another group of people replayed their clip and discussed how calmly the guard handled the situation. One woman said, "He wasn't rude at all. He just did what he needed to do." Her husband nodded with respect. The videos were passed among small groups, quietly spreading through the crowd like an interesting moment that everyone wanted to talk about. People admired the guard's professionalism and the discipline he showed while dealing with an unexpected situation. Sandra, although trying her best not to look, could sense people watching her. She heard a few soft whispers nearby. "That's the lady who got too close, right?" "Yes, but she seems fine now. I hope she's okay. She probably didn't mean any harm." Even though none of the comments were harsh, Sandra felt her embarrassment deepen. She wished she could somehow undo what had happened. She didn't want to be remembered as the person who had broken a rule at Buckingham Palace. She certainly didn't want to be the subject of strangers' phone screens. Just when she believed the moment might fade away, two palace security staff members walked toward her. They were calm, polite, and professional. Their steps were steady, and they carried a kind, respectful presence. They weren't there to upset her. They were simply there to follow their responsibilities, just like the guard. "Ma'am," one of them said in a gentle tone, "may we speak with you for a moment?" Sandra's stomach fluttered with nervousness. She nodded quickly, forcing herself to appear calm. She stepped a little away from the rope to speak with them without blocking anyone's view. One of the staff members offered a reassuring smile. "We're here to check in and make sure everything is fine. We noticed you stepped into the restricted area earlier." Sandra swallowed, feeling her embarrassment return. "Yes. I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to break the rules. I just wanted a close picture. I wasn't thinking." The staff members nodded understandingly. "We appreciate your honesty. Many visitors get excited, but we do need to take these situations seriously. The restricted area is in place for good reason." Sandra nodded. "I understand. I won't do it again." They handed her a small information card that politely explained visitor guidelines and safety rules. Then one of the staff members said, "Thank you for cooperating. Please enjoy the rest of your visit." Sandra felt relieved that they were calm and kind. She sighed softly as they walked away, grateful that the conversation had been respectful. But her relief didn't last long, because she noticed a few tourists still looking at her. And then she heard something she hadn't expected. Someone said quietly, "I think the video is already spreading online." Sandra's heart skipped a beat. She turned to see a few people holding their phones, with the video already posted on social media platforms. The clip had been up for only minutes, but people were reacting quickly. Some viewers commented harmless jokes. Others expressed admiration for the guard, and a few simply described the moment as surprising. Sandra felt a tightness in her chest. The idea of the video spreading made her feel exposed. She hadn't wanted to become the center of attention. She especially didn't want to be known for something embarrassing. She looked around nervously, wondering how many people had recorded her without knowing she was becoming part of a growing online trend. She wished she could hide behind her hat or disappear inside the crowd. She wanted the moment to vanish. But instead, it kept growing around her. A group of teenagers nearby laughed lightly, not at her, but at something in the video. One of them said, "This clip is going to get so many views." The guard's voice sounds so strong. Another replied, "Yeah, he's cool. He handled it so well." Once again, the attention wasn't directly aimed at Sandra in a cruel way. It was mostly admiration for the guard's professionalism. But Sandra still felt the spotlight pressing on her. She was part of the video, and she couldn't change that. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to calm down. She tried to remind herself that the moment would pass eventually. People shared interesting clips every day. Maybe this would be forgotten by tomorrow. But even as she tried to comfort herself, she couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment. She replayed the scene in her mind, the guard stepping forward, his commanding voice, the sudden attention from the crowd. Everything had felt so big. Too big. She had only wanted a picture. But now, she had unintentionally created a moment that people couldn't stop talking about. A family walked past her at that moment. The mother gave her a small, warm smile. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked kindly. Sandra nodded, surprised by the gentle question. "Yes. Thank you. I'm okay." The mother smiled again. "Good. Things happen. Don't worry too much." Her kindness eased Sandra's heart a little. She appreciated the understanding tone. She wished everyone could see the situation that way. Nearby, the guard continued standing in perfect form. He hadn't moved since returning to his position. His presence remained strong, yet calm. Visitors admired him without crossing boundaries now. The rope was respected more than before, as if the crowd had collectively learned a lesson from what happened. Sandra took one more long breath and lifted her phone again. Not for a selfie, not for a close-up, just for a simple picture from a respectful distance. This time, she captured the palace, the guard, the sunlight reflecting off the golden gates, and the peaceful atmosphere returning. The picture came out beautiful, and this time, she felt proud in a different way. She didn't feel pride for breaking rules or getting close to the guard. She felt proud for understanding something she hadn't understood before: respect, boundaries, and the importance of following guidelines, not just for her safety but for everyone's experience. As she stepped back to rejoin the crowd, she knew the moment wasn't completely over. The clip might continue spreading online for a while. People might discuss it, but she also understood that she couldn't change the past. What she could change was how she behaved moving forward. The incident had humbled her. It had taught her something unexpected. And although she still felt embarrassed, she also felt wiser. Little did she know, the final part of her experience was still waiting to unfold, an ending she never imagined when she first arrived at the palace that day. Sandra stood quietly among the crowd, trying to blend in as best as she could. Though the moment had passed, a soft reminder of embarrassment still lingered inside her. She held her phone gently, not to take selfies anymore, but simply to keep her hands busy. She didn't want to stand out again, not even for a second. She wanted everything to return to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after what she had experienced. The guard stood in his usual position once more, calm and composed. Nothing about him showed that anything unusual had happened. His posture was perfect, his focus steady, and his presence as strong as ever. Sandra admired him silently now. Not as a prop for a picture, but as someone responsible and dedicated. She felt a quiet respect for him that she hadn't felt before. Around her, the crowd slowly returned to its usual rhythm. People smiled, children played, and cameras clicked in every direction. A group of tourists laughed softly while taking group photos. A guide talked cheerfully about the history of Buckingham Palace. Life continued as it always had, but for Sandra, everything felt slightly different. She had learned something important, something she would carry with her long after she left London. Trying to shake off the last bit of embarrassment, she decided to walk a little farther down the viewing area. She admired the palace from a new angle. taking gentle pictures of the architecture, the open sky, and the cheerful crowd. She didn't rush. She didn't push. She simply observed. As she continued walking, she overheard small conversations from various tourists. Some mentioned the beautiful palace gates. Others talked about their travel plans, and a few were still discussing the earlier moment, but not in a harsh way, more in an amazed, storytelling tone. That guard's voice was so strong, one man said to his friend. He handled everything so professionally, the friend replied. Sandra felt a tiny flutter in her stomach when she realized the conversation was still about the moment she was involved in, but she also felt relief. They were talking about the guard, not judging her. That softened the tension in her shoulders. A little farther away, she saw an older couple sitting on a bench. They looked peaceful and happy as they admired the palace. Something about their calmness drew Sandra in. She sat at the opposite end of the bench, taking a short break from walking. The couple noticed her and offered warm smiles. "Lovely place, isn't it?" the woman said kindly. Sandra nodded. "Yes, very lovely. You look like you've had quite a day," the man added gently, not accusingly. Sandra let out a soft laugh, realizing she probably didn't hide her emotions very well. "Yes, it's been a bit more eventful than I expected," she admitted. The couple smiled with understanding. The woman leaned forward slightly and said, "Travel often teaches us things we never planned to learn." Sandra nodded again. She appreciated those simple, comforting words. They felt true. After a few peaceful minutes, Sandra stood up, feeling lighter. She thanked the couple for their company and continued her walk. By now, the earlier excitement had faded completely. People moved around freely again, and the tension from the incident had melted away. Sandra felt more at ease with each step she took. She eventually reached a quieter corner where fewer people stood. From here, she had a beautiful view of the palace gardens. Flowers of different colors waved gently in the breeze, creating a soft, colorful border around the historic building. Sandra lifted her phone and took a picture not of herself, but of the gardens. The photo looked calm and gentle, exactly how she felt now. She realized something important. Sometimes, the best moments come from simply observing, not forcing anything. As she stood there, thinking quietly, a man approached her. He looked friendly and held a small camera in his hand. His tone was polite when he spoke. "Excuse me," he said. "Were you the lady earlier who stepped a bit too close to the guard?" Sandra's heart skipped again, but she nodded softly. "Yes, that was me." The man smiled kindly. "I just wanted to say you handled the situation well afterward. Not everyone would stay and continue enjoying their visit. Some people would leave right away from embarrassment. But you stayed. That shows strength." Sandra blinked, surprised. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I felt embarrassed, but I didn't want it to ruin my trip." "That's the spirit," the man replied warmly. "Travel is all about learning and experiencing new things. Sometimes mistakes happen. What matters is how we respond." Sandra appreciated his kindness. His words felt like a gentle pat on the back. After a short conversation, the man walked away to take pictures of the palace, leaving her with a calmer heart. She continued exploring the area, taking pictures of the gardens, the fountain, and the palace walls. She kept her distance, respecting all the signs and ropes, and for the first time since arriving, she truly took in the beauty around her. After a while, she felt ready to leave. She took one final look at the palace. The guard was still standing firmly in his place, silent, steady, and seemingly unbothered by what had happened earlier. His professionalism gave her comfort. She lifted her hand slightly as a small gesture of respect, even though he didn't react. As she walked toward the exit, she heard the sound of laughter nearby. A group of teenagers were watching the video again. But this time, they weren't focused on her at all. One of them said, "Look how calm the guard is. He's like a real-life statue, but with perfect awareness." Another added, "Yeah, and he didn't sound angry, just responsible." Hearing that made Sandra smile softly. It helped her realize something important. People weren't interested in making fun of her. They were simply fascinated by the guards' discipline. She was only a small part of the moment. Outside the palace area, Sandra found a quiet spot where she could sit and reflect. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air clear her thoughts. The embarrassment she had felt earlier had softened, replaced by a calm sense of understanding. She replayed the whole day in her mind, not as a stressful memory but as a story with a lesson. She thought about how excited she had been, how focused she had been on getting the perfect picture, and how she had forgotten to respect boundaries. And then she thought about how kindly the staff handled the situation, how calm the guard remained, and how many strangers showed compassion afterward. Sandra realized that the day had taught her more than any simple tourist attraction ever could. It taught her patience. It taught her respect. And most importantly, it taught her that even when things go wrong, there is always a way to grow from them. After sitting for a while longer, she opened her phone and looked at the pictures she had taken from a safe distance. They were beautiful. They captured the palace in a peaceful, elegant light, without breaking any rules. She selected one of the best pictures and wrote a caption for her travel journal. Sometimes, the best memories come from the lessons we don't expect. She smiled, closed her phone, and stood up. It was time to continue her trip and enjoy the rest of her day. The sun was still shining, the breeze still gentle, and the city still full of wonders waiting to be discovered. As she walked away from Buckingham Palace, she felt lighter, wiser, and surprisingly grateful for the experience, one she would likely remember for the rest of her life. And though she didn't know it, her story was quietly spreading online, not as a tale of embarrassment, but as a moment that showed how calm, respectful, and dedicated the royal guard was. In a way, she had become part of something bigger. Sandra walked down the street, smiling softly. Her trip had not gone as planned, but it had given her something even better, a meaningful story she'd never forget.